This story began where no one would have expected it, in a tiny village lost among fields and forests, where the only connection to the outside world was a mail truck that came once a week. There was no high-speed internet here, no new technologies, but there was one woman. Her name was Helen. She was 82 years old. And one day, she decided to do what millions wouldn't dare, write a letter to Elon Musk. She wasn't seeking fame. She wasn't asking for millions. All she wanted was for her beloved village not to disappear from the map forever. And, strangely enough, it was her letter that changed everything. Dear Elon Musk, my name is Helen. I live in the village of Dixville Notch. Life here is simple. We heat our homes with wood stoves, catch a phone signal on the roof, and hear the news through a newspaper that arrives a week late. I heard you launch rockets into space and build cars that don't need gas. That's wonderful, of course, but maybe you could do something for folks like us. Maybe set up internet access so the grandchildren can study, or fix the road so that an ambulance can reach us faster than in 3 hours. We're not big people like your billionaire friends. But we are good people, just old ones now. If you happen to find time for one small village, we would be grateful. This letter would have likely sat forgotten in a drawer for months. If not for one strange coincidence, that day a sack of letters meant for ordinary people, not contracts and business proposals, mistakenly arrived at the SpaceX office. And among them was a simple letter from Grandma Helen, a letter that somehow ended up right on Elon Musk's desk. Night was slowly falling outside the windows, and Elon Musk was still sitting at his desk, surrounded by piles of papers, tablets, and mugs of cold coffee. Blueprints for a new rocket, just one of the thousands of ideas meant to change the world, glowed on the screen behind him. Amid the clutter, he absent-mindedly picked up a real, handwritten letter, the kind that smelled faintly of paper and ink. Expecting just another commercial request, he unfolded it and began to read. Dear Elon Musk, heating stoves with wood, catching signal on the roof, maybe set up internet or fix the road. Elon smiled. Somewhere deep down, the idea amused him. The billionaire, the future engineer, and a grandmother from Dixville Notch asking for a repaired road. He leaned back in his chair, letting himself relax for a moment. Normally, he would have just flipped past a letter like this, but something about the simplicity of the words touched him. He looked out at the lights of the city, and he remembered why he started it all in the first place, not for wealth, not for fame, but to make the world just a little bit better. Elon grabbed his phone and called his assistant. His voice was calm but firm. Find me that village, and that grandma. We're starting a new project. And so, from a single letter, began the story that would not only change the fate of a forgotten village, but also Elon Musk himself. The search took several days. As it turned out, Dixville Notch had no online databases, no official website, not even stable phone lines. Elon's assistants had to contact local authorities, find numbers through acquaintances, through the post office, through the only village store that sold bread, milk, and batteries. Finally, the number was found. A landline, old and creaky with every ring. The phone itself stood on a wooden table in Helen's hallway, next to a kerosene lamp and a vase of dried daisies. It was early morning. The spring sun shone mischievously outside, the wind stirred the curtains, and the air smelled of bread and earth. When the phone rang, Helen first thought it was Mary calling again to chat about the price of sugar. Muttering slightly, she picked up the receiver. A man's voice, confident, yet remarkably gentle, greeted her. He introduced himself. Hello, Helen. This is Elon Musk. Helen frowned. The name sounded strange to her. She frowned even deeper. Who? She asked, pressing the receiver closer to her ear. Elon Musk. The voice patiently repeated, "You wrote me a letter." For a moment, there was silence. Helen remembered, oh yes, she had written it. Her friends had laughed, saying it was pointless to write to such an important man. But she had written because she believed that sometimes miracles do happen. A bit skeptically, she answered, "So you're the real Musk, calling from space?" A soft, genuine laugh rang out on the other end. "Almost from space," Elon said. "From Los Angeles." Helen grunted. For her, Los Angeles and the moon were equally distant and incomprehensible. The conversation went slowly. Helen spoke unhurriedly, occasionally using proverbs, which Elon tried to understand by her tone. She told him about her village, about how in winter the road turned into mush, how the postman delivered newspapers a week late, and how the grandchildren had moved to the city because even mobile signal could only be caught in the attic. Elon listened carefully. He rarely heard such simple, honest stories without embellishments, without anyone trying to sell or beg for something. When Helen finished, he simply said, "I want to help, really help." Starting with the road, with the internet, with the basics. Helen sighed, as if a burden had lifted from her shoulders. You all dream about Mars and rockets. But simple folks just need a better road and a fixed store. Then maybe we'll reach Mars ourselves someday. Elon smiled. He realized this wasn't just one woman's request. It was a cry for help from all those left in the shadows of big cities and big dreams. They talked for nearly an hour. Sometimes the signal broke, and Helen patiently waited and resumed speaking in her warm, slightly hoarse voice. Before hanging up, Elon promised, "I'll come, in person." There was a pause. Then Helen, quietly, almost to herself, said, "Godspeed." And the receiver creaked one last time. Elon sat in his office, holding the phone in his hands. He was surrounded by millions of dollars in investments, blueprints of supersonic rockets, virtual models of Mars colonies. But at that moment, all these grand projects seemed distant and not so important. Ahead of him was another mission, a much more down-to-earth one. After his conversation with Helen, Elon sat quietly in his chair, eyes fixed on a map spread across his desk. Dixville Notch, just a tiny dot on an enormous planet, a place you'd never hear about on talk shows, never read about in glossy newspapers, a place that would never make it into a tourist brochure. And yet, something about that little village stirred something in him, something deeper than any of his grand ambitions ever had. The next morning, he gathered his team. Meetings like these were usually brisk, and to the point: launch calculations, algorithm updates, financial reports. But today, his voice carried a different weight, calm, but with a quiet resolve that everyone in the room could feel. "We're going to the village," he said. The room fell into a puzzled silence. "For what?" someone finally asked. "Not for show, not for publicity," Elon replied. "There are people there who need help, and we're going to help them." There were exchanged glances, raised eyebrows, but no objections. Those who had worked with Elon long enough knew, once he set his mind on something, nothing could stand in his way. Preparations began in earnest. Reaching Dixville Notch wasn't going to be easy. The nearest paved road ended miles before the village, and beyond that, only rough country, tracks the kind that turned into rivers of mud every spring. First on the list was heavy equipment, a reliable all-terrain vehicle with oversized tires, built to go where regular cars would sink, without a trace. Alongside it, a mobile satellite station was assembled to provide at least a basic connection, and generators were packed for power in a place untouched by modern grids. No detail was left unchecked. They loaded up warm jackets and sturdy boots, food supplies and essentials for the villagers, books for the local school and gifts for the children, building kits, small tablets. Little glimpses of a wider world. Someone half-jokingly suggested bringing a Cybertruck to test it against the mud and dirt roads. Elon laughed, shaking his head. Not this time. For a journey like this, there was no room for experiments, only tried-and-true machines built to endure. Somewhere amid the preparations, an assistant handed him a note titled, "How to Speak in the Countryside." It read like a list of quiet reminders. Don't promise what you can't deliver. If you're invited inside, say yes, it's a sign of trust. Listen more than you speak. Elon skimmed the lines and smiled to himself. Wherever there were real people, the same simple rules seemed to apply: honesty, respect, openness. The last evening before departure, he spent alone. The city lights flickered outside, offering their familiar comforts, but his thoughts wandered far from glass towers and busy streets back to that little village, where an old telephone sat on a wooden table, and people looked down a dusty road, waiting for change. He knew this wouldn't be just another trip. Maybe, in its own quiet way, it would be one of the most important journeys he had ever taken. Dawn broke gently over the small airstrip, a thin layer of mist curling around the wheels of the grounded private jet, as if the world itself wanted to hold its breath for a moment longer. Elon stepped out of the cabin and was greeted by his small team, 3 people, an off-roader fitted with satellite antennas, and a couple of dust-covered suitcases stacked neatly on the ground. The engines powered down, and the usual roar of airport life faded into a peaceful quiet. No bustling terminals, no flashing billboards, just open skies, endless fields, and the soft rustle of grass in the breeze. Everything here felt disarmingly simple: crooked wooden fences, weather-beaten hangars, the peeling paint of the terminal building, and a single faded sign that read, "Welcome." No crowds, no noise, only anticipation. Elon ran through the equipment checklist: satellite dish, generator, fuel reserves. He slipped into the warm jacket his team had brought from headquarters, eyes drifting toward the dirt road, stretching off toward the horizon. "About 5 hours from here," one of the assistants said quietly beside him. 100 different expeditions flashed through his mind, journeys to far-off, unfamiliar corners of the planet. But never had a trip felt both so small and so significant all at once. The team piled into the army-grade all-terrain vehicle. Its massive tires sank into the soft spring mud, and with a roar and a lurch, the vehicle started forward. At first, there was paved road, then a tightly packed gravel path, and finally a narrow, rutted trail flanked by wild nettles and thorn bushes. The vehicle swayed and jolted, but steadily pushed ahead, dark sprays of mud flying from the wheels. Inside, the air smelled of gasoline, fresh electronics, and something homier, a bottle of Kvass packed alongside supplies for the local school. An assistant joked that this might end up being the most unusual test drive in SpaceX history, and Elon laughed a real, unguarded laugh that echoed across the empty fields. Out here, far from the sprawling cities, even a billionaire could feel like an adventurer, a pioneer charting new territory. The journey paused at a small bridge spanning a narrow stream. The old wooden planks sagged dangerously under the weight of the vehicle, and the team had to switch to a tow cable to cross safely, while the mechanics fastened the line. Elon stepped outside and took in the quiet beauty of the landscape, the meandering creek choked with reeds, poplars reaching their long arms toward the water, and little houses perched on a distant hill as if placed there by a careful hand generations ago. When they finally rattled back onto the trail, the sun had climbed higher, bathing everything in a soft golden light. The village was drawing near. First came a scattering of homesteads with blue-painted shutters and backyard gardens where mothers tended to chickens. Then, A handful of houses lined the village's single street, and at the end, the bright red roof of Helen's home. The vehicle rumbled to a stop right at the gate, and people began gathering at the fence. From neighboring yards came elderly men in heavy sheepskin coats, children in colorful jackets, and women carrying trays stacked with sandwiches and freshly brewed tea. They eyed Elon's black jacket and strange glasses, whispering to each other and smiling. Elon swung open the heavy door and stepped out. He slowly took in the simple beauty around him, the wooden benches outside Helen's house, the weathered woodshed stacked with logs, and the whitewashed wall framed by blossoming cherry trees. He walked along the muddy path to the gate, where Helen was waiting bundled in a wool scarf, a soft smile on her face, no cameras, no shiny corporate banners. Just honest glances, quiet astonishment, and barely contained happiness. In her eyes he could see a lifetime of patience, hardship, and a quiet pride for her village. Elon reached out his hand, and for a moment they stood there, a billionaire and a grandmother, bound by a simple, shared dream, to make life a little better. The road behind them was conquered, but the real expedition was only beginning. Ahead lay the tasks of repairing the main road, laying down cables, setting up a communications tower, and, most importantly, getting to know every resident and learning from them the simple, vital wisdom of everyday life. Elon took a step forward toward the place where the future of Dixville Notch would soon be rewritten, together with its people. The morning sun poured warmly over Dixville Notch as Elon and his small team stepped onto the village's main street. A modest traffic jam had already formed, tractors, supply trucks, and curious locals leaning into the cabs for a better look. Along the churned-up gravel, under the drone of engines, bright orange safety tapes fluttered in the breeze, a sign that today, real change would begin. First, the engineering crew set to work, leveling the ruts in the road. A local tractor loaned by the village school bravely tried to take on the load, but quickly bogged down in the sticky spring mud. That's when Elon's all-terrain vehicle, fitted with a front scoop and powered by a roaring diesel engine, rolled into action. It methodically flattened the path, pouring gravel, packing down the clay, and carving a firm foundation for the future. Meanwhile, local men guided by Elon's foreman worked by hand, smoothing the road's edges to prevent the ruts from forming again. Here and there, children's toy carts and tiny bicycles left near the schoolyard threatened to tip over into the fresh mud, drawing bursts of laughter from the workers. Whenever a little cyclist got stuck, the tractor would carefully lift them out, and old Mark, one of the village elders, would shake his head and chuckle, teasing everyone that machines can't solve everything. Alongside the road repair work, the communications team got to work laying the cable. At first, they dug the trench by hand shovels, sparking against rocks, mud splashing onto their arms and faces. Then they carefully threaded fiber optic lines from the mobile satellite station that had been set up on the hill by the school. A few schoolchildren, supervised by IT specialists, helped unspool the cable, occasionally tangling the ends into what they laughingly called the great knot weaving. But the biggest shock came when Elon fired up the generator. The engine's rumble swept over the village, and the indicators on his portable laptop blinked to life, network available. A cheer rose from behind the cable crew. Children started running excitedly around the station, and Nanny Kate cried out, "Look, Internet! Now we can even video call the grandkids in the city." By lunchtime, with the dust settled and a kettle hissing atop a portable stove, Elon invited everyone to gather by the old square with its stone well. Under a makeshift canopy of bedsheets, he outlined the next steps, reinforcing the road shoulders, setting up a few signal repeaters, and installing a couple of learning tablets in the schoolroom. Grandma Helen hunched nervously on her stool, To her, all this talk of repeaters and cable lines sounded grand but confusing. She suggested a simpler approach. Let's first fix the road so the kids don't get their feet wet going to school. Then you can build all your fancy gadgets. Elon smiled and promised. No technology would move forward without solid ground under the wheels. At the school, a small group of the most curious kids had gathered children who had never before seen a working Wi-Fi connection. They crowded at the classroom door as Elon and the teacher handed out tablets. One tablet froze on the loading screen, and little Sam, frowning and tapping the display, declared, "I think this is some kind of magic." The teacher tried to explain the basics of the technology, but the children kept sneaking fascinated glances at Elon's black jacket and shiny glasses, as if he were an artifact from another planet. Then came a practical assignment, to make a video message for Grandma Helen, showing her how quickly her grandkids could now reach her. The children eagerly interviewed their classmates, laughing whenever someone accidentally turned on a bunny ear filter, and in the end, they created a chaotic, heartfelt, wonderfully human message. By evening, the work slowed, and the heavy vehicles pulled back, their engines falling silent. The smell of homemade pies and freshly brewed tea drifted down the street, an open invitation to an improvised outdoor dinner. Residents spread old quilts over fence rails and laid out the food: cabbage pies, homemade cheese, and garden berry jam. Elon sat at a table with Helen and the school children, watching how even the most technical projects could end in a living, breathing celebration. And he realized, real change begins where people come together, not behind computer screens, but around a shared table, in the simple, everyday warmth of life. Exactly 1 month had passed since Elon Musk arrived in Dixville Notch. The village was slowly but surely beginning to change. The hard days, early mornings, and battles with the weather were still there, but they no longer seemed so hopeless. The road had finally been repaired, the internet cable was laid, and the connection was stable. Dixville Notch was no longer just a forgotten dot on the map. At first, it was all a bit of an adventure. Tractors got stuck in the mud, off-road vehicles churned up little ponds, but with each passing day, the road grew firmer and straighter. Cars no longer skidded on the climbs, and local children no longer had to sneak around the train tracks to get to school. Elon often drove his rugged vehicle along the new route, watching as the old tractors now worked hand in hand with modern technology, and men and women from the village, armed with sharp knives and shovels, helped reinforce the road shoulders. Just as Musk had promised, the road wasn't just beautiful, it was useful. It now led not only to the neighboring town, but also to new opportunities for every resident. For the children of Dixville Notch, a small revolution was underway. Teachers no longer spent lessons clutching handwritten schedules. Instead, tablets equipped with new educational programs transformed their classes into interactive spaces, where kids didn't just copy notes, but talked to teachers from big cities, accessed electronic libraries, and competed in online contests. Elon personally helped set up the first online lesson, where local kids asked questions in real time to students from other regions, and the teacher, via a camera feed, explained new chemistry formulas. At first, they were shy, avoiding the camera and reluctant to speak to the students on the screen. But within a few days, it was clear a whole new world had opened up for them. The classroom became alive, full of questions, ideas, and excitement. The kids now learned not just from textbooks, but from real experiences, from a sense of being part of something much bigger. But perhaps the most profound changes were happening among the adults. For the first time in years, local farmers had access to online courses to improve their skills. Over cups of tea with Helen, they discussed how the internet could help them, ordering tractor parts online, signing up for agronomy classes, or even organizing fresh vegetable deliveries to nearby towns. In the mornings, delivery trucks now rolled through the village streets. By evening, small groups of women gathered, sharing new ideas. There was more work, yes, but also a new rhythm to life. Elon noticed how the village was gradually, quietly changing, coming alive, yet still retaining its relaxed, unhurried charm. Now, sitting on a bench, one could talk not only about farm life, but about the latest news from the big cities, or even hear what was happening on the other side of the world. Elon spent a lot of time talking with the locals. Sometimes it was a little unusual for him adapting to their simple, direct questions and thoughts. He taught the children how to program simple robots, showed the women how to use new gadgets, but most of all, he was struck by Helen and her quiet, grounded wisdom. In the evenings, when the last workers returned home, Helen always invited Elon to dinner. From her window, you could see the lake, and beyond it the entire village, glowing softly with the light from windows. Elon often marveled at how complete life here felt, how nothing was missing in this small place. That's how we live without fuss. Helen would say, pouring him another cup of tea, everything we need is right here. And Elon understood that his project was never just about technology. It was about something much deeper, a return to simple values, real care, and real people. Musk's project didn't just change the village's infrastructure. It transformed the way people thought about what small places could offer. Dixville Notch became a symbol proof that even a tiny village could be part of global processes. Residents began developing their own projects, learning new professions, and, thanks to the internet, children could now see a world far beyond their fields and forests. It was a slow process but a steady one. Elon continued visiting Dixville Notch, watching the number of people who were eager to grow steadily rise. In time, there were new startups, small businesses, and even some villagers who were invited to big cities to join larger projects. Elon Musk knew that what they had achieved in Dixville Notch was only the beginning. For him, it wasn't just another innovative initiative, it was a true social experiment, a living example of what could happen when technology and human effort worked hand in hand. He realized that this little village would one day serve as a blueprint for countless other places around the world, where people longed for change but didn't know where to start. And yet, among all his high-tech projects and startups, Dixville Notch was perhaps the one place Elon Musk would remember for the rest of his life.